Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Lakeville Planning Board to order. It is Thursday, February 10th, 2022 at 7 p.m. This is a remote meeting in accordance with the provisions allowed by the Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. The February 10th, 2022 public meeting of the Planning Board will be held remotely. However, to view this meeting in progress, please go to facebook.com/LakeCAM. You do not need a Facebook account to view the meeting. This meeting will be recorded and available to be viewed at a later date at www.lakecam.tv/. For the record, in attendance tonight for the Planning Board, I have myself, Mark Knox, I have Barbara Mankowski present, and Michelle McEachran present. In addition, I have the new town planner, Mark Resnick, present. Tonight will be mostly internal business meeting for us. We have no public hearing scheduled for tonight. I have the master plan implementation fee review project update on the agenda. I spoke to Mark earlier today about that. I think we'll continue that. So he has a little more time to revisit that. I think that makes most sense. Mark, would you agree with that? That was a gravel removal permit and maybe you reviewing all the fees that we came up with.
Yes.
One thing I just wanted to ask Barbara and Michelle, you guys did a lot of research and you could you help Mark with, he wanted to look at the towns that maybe you guys had picked from, and I just in a conversation, I didn't recall. Could you tell him what towns you used to use as similars for the fees?
Well, Michelle, if I remember correctly, Michelle, we had a spreadsheet and then we put, you remember that? And then we had the towns listed.
Yeah,
So
and you even went so far as to find the median home values, and we were comparing to towns with the similar median home values as well. I can see if I can dig up that spreadsheet. I know it was like Plymouth was one of them, and yeah, there's a bunch of them. It was more than, I'd say, 3 or 4 or 6.
So if you guys, one of you or both of you could forward that to Mark, he was gonna look at the fees that we came up with, just to kind of make sure that he felt they made sense, as well as I just requested him to look at the possibility of putting the gravel removal permit fee on our schedule, because if we permitted a project, that would preclude the Board of Selectmen from doing that because of the new bylaw they adopted at town meeting. So I didn't want the town to lose out on the revenue, so I asked him to look into that as well. So with that said, I'm a motion to continue discussion on the fee review project until our next meeting, which would be February 24th
second,
at 7 p.m. So I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Barbara?
hi.
Michelle?
Aye.
Myself. Motion carries unanimously. Master fee project will be continued. Next item on the agenda is zoning board of appeals for 3 Sassamon Circle. This is sort of one of those, in my opinion, a residential thing that we normally don't comment on. It was had to do with a shed close to a property line. Nothing to do with the business property. If either of you have a comment or a concern, you can certainly voice it. If not, I would motion to not comment.
Second that motion.
You good with that, Michelle?
Yes.
Okay, so I made a motion to not comment to the zoning board of appeals. Barbara seconded it. So a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor? Barbara?
Aye.
Myself, vote aye. Oh, I'm sorry, Michelle?
Aye.
Took that out of order. So moving on, we have a couple other items on the agenda. First one is the update of the sign bylaw, which Mark put a bunch of time into, taking what we had done and adding to that, I think cleaning up. Mark, do you want to speak to that?
Sure.
And I don't expect you to read the whole thing, but if you just wanted to give a summary of what you did.
So as far as what I've done, so the first two sections are exactly the same as the current bylaw. They haven't changed at all, and as are the first part of the next section as far as procedures go. Oh, wait a minute, I'm looking at the wrong, oh, we're doing signs. That's site plan. Sorry, wrong folder. I got too many.
I have to say, Mark, it's so nice to have you.
Thank you, even with that confusion.
With confusion.
You'll put up with me. Okay, good. So here we go. So the sign bylaw. So the first part of the sign bylaw is that's new is definitions, and these will be added to actually the definition section of the for this entire zoning bylaw is how I've written it. So and so we have definitions for some specific types of signs. Here I have not changed those since the last time we just talked. We did talk about, oh no, I did add two more. But we did talk about change, because we have electronic message boards and then we have electronic outdoor advertising. And I felt that we should keep in the electronic outdoor advertising. Those are the large billboards you usually see along the highways nowadays, that they're constantly changing different messages. And so I just left the definition in and I just put it under prohibited. So it's absolutely clear that we don't want those types of signs. I did leave the electronic message boards in because those are the kinds that we have quite a few of on both Main Street and on Bedford Street for many of the businesses. So those, from the ones I was able to measure on the plans, they're no longer that were submitted for approval. They're no larger than 12 square feet. So I've specifically put a limitation on those of 12 square feet. And again, anything larger than that's prohibited. And so we've done that. The other two definitions I've added is I've added the definition for a wall sign. I know it sounds kind of obvious, and but I also added a definition for a window sign. So those are signs attached to or inside of a window or even inside a building but visible from the outside. Sometimes businesses will stick stuff on a shelf right facing outward. So I've defined those and put some limitations on those types of signs as well further as we go into this section here. Then the purpose of the sign bylaw is the same, and then I've added a new section that actually requires having, and this is the same as our last meeting, but it specifically says you need a permit from the building commissioner, and yeah, you have to submit, application with fees and sketches and the types of illumination for your permit, and that the fees are determined by the select board. They will set the fees for that. The next part of, hello.
Got it.
The next part of the bylaw is the same. That's the general sign regulations, the way they are today. We haven't changed that much at all. Those are pretty much the same. What I have added is some more specificity for specific types of signs. So, so I said the first one is sign should have some landscaping at the base. For the freestanding signs, they must be maintained. Signs are permitted to have either changeable copy, which are the removable letters you put up, or you can have an electronic message board, but you can't have both. And that's, I wrote that in this week, so that's new from the last time we met. And I moved this portion into this section, which has to do with changeable copy signs that shall not exceed 12 square feet, and they may be internally illuminated, but they must be shut off between 11 and 6. And then the next one is the same language pertaining to electronic message boards, not exceeding 12 square feet, and they must be turned off from 11 to 6. Then I added a specific dimension for internally illuminated signs. And I said they shall not exceed 24 square feet. So, wall signs, 15% of the wall area or 150 square feet, whichever is less. Some communities have 20% and 200 square feet. Some communities have 10% and 100 square feet for some of the smaller downtown districts. So I kind of picked this one in the middle. And then window signs shall not exceed 30% of the total area of all windows and doors. So like the liquor stores, they always like to put up the banners, you know, advertising some special in the window. They'll still be able to do that, or a deli or something like that, advertising specials on stuff. The section under exemptions is the same. I haven't made any changes to what's there. I've just added to that section. And so temporary subdivision signs, not to exceed 32 square feet, permanent subdivision or residential development signs which don't exceed 12 square feet. And I added that they may be externally illuminated by spotlights set back 10 feet from the property line. So let's see. Oh yeah, the sign for a building under construction, and then fuel pump signs that are required by state law. And there are some requirements for that. The next section on temporary signs is the same. I haven't changed that. I've renumbered the next section from 6.61 and moved it, or 6.66 and made it 6.61. And the first one is the same, saying the zoning board can issue a special permit for signs larger in area, specified or a greater number of signs. However, the second one says they may not be issued for signs that are specifically prohibited by this bylaw. So if it's something that specifically says, like, you can't have a billboard, they can't issue a special permit for that. But if it says you can only, which it does in some of the existing regs, you can only, a business can only have 2 signs, and they ask for a third sign, they can, as long as it isn't a prohibited type of sign, they can ask for another one. The next section is just renumbered. This is the prohibited section, and the first 4 are the same, relating to flashing signs and casting glare and other things. So we discussed a little bit about roof-mounted signs last time, and I said roof-mounted signs that are taller than 2 feet tall or extend over the peak of the roof. So I added some specificity to that. No signs on utility poles, trees, and so forth, portable signs. The banners and ribbons and streamers and spinners and balloons, I didn't change any of those. Electronic message boards are the portion of a sign that exceeds 12 square feet. So here's the limitation on electronic message boards, and the same thing on changeable copies, that if they exceed 12 square feet, they're specifically prohibited. Then I added the electronic outdoor advertising signs specifically there, and internally illuminated signs greater than 32 square feet. Section on removal of signs for unsafe or abandoned signs, those are the same as last time. And section on non-conforming signs, I have not edited any of that as well since the last time, as well as the administration of the bylaw, talking about the building commissioner shall administer it, and any appeals of his decision shall be in accordance with section 8, which is you appeal it to the zoning board. And that's a summary of what we have here.
I just had one concern on, it's, I guess, page 3.
Okay.
There's 2, I guess, right side by side. 6.6.313 and 6.6.314. Internally illuminated signs shall not exceed 24 square feet. Where I guess I'd be looking for some clarification. So if there was a common directory sign, we allow up to 64 square feet of signage for a building with multiple tenants. Are we saying there that an individual tenant can't have a sign that's bigger than 24 square feet, but there could be more than one sign
No,
that's
well, I
illuminated?
think what that's saying is that, so you could have an internally illuminated sign, let's say for, Fred's office park, and then and that could be 24 square feet, but under it, the individual businesses in the park would have to have painted or carved or some other type of signs. In other words, the entire thing could not be internally illuminated. Yeah, it's kind
Okay.
of putting a limitation on that. I mean, there was some discussion about trying to have better quality signs than lots of internally illuminated signs, and starting to look too commercialized. So I thought, we have plenty of internally illuminated signs, but I thought we should start limiting perhaps the size of them so that,
So I guess that would be another clarification would be, so if we have a standalone business and they're allowed up to 32 square feet of signage,
right.
but they could only have 24 square feet of that illuminated.
That's correct, unless they go to the zoning board.
So, and again, I'm not arguing it. I'm just looking to make clear so that if you had a common directory sign, it still only would be 24 square feet for multiple businesses.
Right.
Unless we make an exception that maybe they were allowed 48 square feet of illuminated or a common directory sign, and again, I'm impartial to it. I just want to make it clear and fair. That's all.
How many, I don't know if we have any signs for business or office park that are multiple tenants that are, the entire thing is internally illuminated, because
On Bedford Street, the old Siddell's Plaza it's limited tenant occupancy right now, but they have a large common directory sign that has the capability of all of them being illuminated. And again, it doesn't bother me,
Okay,
and I'm looking forward to the future, what you're correcting. So that's just one example of, I guess, the common directory sign that's all impermanently illuminated.
Mark, are
okay.
you talking about the old Siddell's Plaza?
So,
The sign at John Militi's new plaza just up the road, where the cycle place is, the bicycle store. I think that's a multi-tenant. I don't know if they're all internally illuminated though. And then I would have to assume that Prime America building near Dollar Tree has a multi-tenant, possibly illuminated sign. So there might be a couple, Mark, but not,
okay.
there aren't too many. So,
I mean, we could write a certain requirements for multi-tenanted signs and kind of remove. I've seen that in some other bylaws where there's a certain minimum size and you can add so many square feet per tenant or for leasable space.
okay, it'd be consideration. I would defer to Barbara or Michelle. I think they've been more vocal on this, and I'm seeing something that I just would want a clarification. I don't care how it goes. I don't want to sound removed from it, but they had more passion about it, so I would lean on
Right.
them.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Michelle, go right ahead.
I was just gonna say that, I mean, I do like the idea of keeping it minimal, even if it is a common directory, maybe one of them having the illumination rather than all of them. I guess my question was more so, why the difference on 6.6.48 and 6.6.3.13 between the 12 square feet and the 24? I know you said you were keeping a lot of them to that 12 square feet because that's what we do have in town. But I guess I was curious where that 24 square foot was coming from.
Yeah, well, 12 square feet for the message boards or for the different types of message boards is fairly small.
I
Even
think that's
if
actually a
you
number
try
we
and,
came up with prior, right, Mark?
what?
I think we kind of had that number drafted in prior that.
Yeah, you had that number drafted in prior, and it is almost the exact size of all the electronic message boards and changeable copy signs in town. However, what I was referring to here under internally illuminated are the bigger marquee signs or the top portion of a multi-tenanted place that'll have the name of the facility, of the plaza, to be internally illuminated. And that's, so having that being only, for a plaza, only 12 square feet, I thought was a little small. Or if there's a single tenant, they build a new restaurant and they want an internally illuminated sign, to have 12 square feet is a little small. So I thought if you're not gonna prohibit them, then you should set some sort of limitation on the size of them. And so that's why I went with 24. Your standard size for the freestanding size is 32. So I thought it should be a little smaller than that. So that's why I went with 24. That was the
I think that's reasonable. Barbara, do you have any input on this?
Well, I guess in general, I don't love internally illuminated signs as part of maintaining rural character. It would be, and maybe I'm having a hard time visualizing it, but I feel like we have, I'm trying to think there's a building on Bedford Street that I think they have the big signage with multiple tenants, but the lighting comes from above and then leans down. They're not internally lit, and it's a little bit more of a charming look, I think, when it has the lighting externally versus the lighting coming from inside. But I'm not opposed to anything we've done here so far. I do have another question, but on the size, it's hard to visualize.
On the next, I had referenced 6.6.314. The next thing underneath the internally illuminated was, I just wanted a clarification, Mark, on, you had a 15% of the wall area or 150 square feet, whichever is less. Is the 150 square feet the maximum allowable to figure your 15%? Or is that a sign that could be 150 square feet?
Yeah, it could be up to 150 square feet if the building is a large building. So in other words, it's 15% is kind of to give it a proportion to the wall it's attached to. So if they have a large wall, for example, the sign on Walgreens facing on the building is really small for the size of the facade that it's located on. You know, that probably, and I don't know whether that was restricted by something else in the sign ordinance.
I think that was, and I'm guessing that people would probably favor that over, because my concern when I saw the 150 feet was basically that's 6 times the allowable size of the sign at the street, or five and change.
Right. Okay.
So we might want to reduce that number.
Should it say whichever is less or whichever is greater? I don't know. I think I see what you're saying, Mark, with the wording. The wall sign shall not exceed 15% of the area of the wall it is attached to, or 150 square feet. Shall not exceed 150 square feet.
That's a big sign. So I'm
It is.
thinking like, that's for like a big industrial building, something like that,
Right.
which we're not going to have a ton of and don't totally love anyway. I mean, I guess we do want some business in here, but I would personally like to see that be smaller. That's
Okay.
one of the.
I mean, I think your restriction, isn't it? No sign may exceed unless, so earlier in the regulations, it says, unless permitted elsewhere in this bylaw, no sign shall exceed 32 square feet in area. So, I mean, if we take that out, or we say 15% up to 32 square feet, then you pretty much leave it the same size. However, if someone has a really large building, they're going to have a small, kind of funny looking sign. That's all.
Well, based on, I think the way that you guys have reacted to the sign bylaw, my feeling is you would, Barbara and Michelle, would want to leave it at 32 square feet. And to Mark's point, if you wanted to leave some relief through zoning, ZBA, if there was a massive building that required larger signage, and it would seem fair that they could grant it, but the bylaw would only allow 32.
And Mark, if we had a building come in front of us that needed to be permitted and we were able to work with them on maybe density, lot coverage, that kind of thing, would that be an opportunity for us to give some relief on a case-by-case basis during that permitting process? Or would that be inappropriate because it goes to ZBA? Like the bylaw, very festive.
Yeah, so right now, the way this bylaw is written, any relief has to go to the zoning board. So that's how it is today as well.
Okay.
So Barbara and Michelle, I'm totally gonna defer to you guys, but again, I think Dollar Tree was bound to comply and have a smaller Dollar Tree sign on the building because of the bylaw. If that front of that building is 20 feet by 100 feet,
Mhm.
that's 2,000 square feet. That means they could have 150 square foot sign, which would be
Too big.
10 by 15.
Yeah.
Because that's just because Mark has put the 150 in there as the default max, because that 15% could be 300 square feet,
Right.
which would be 10 by 30.
Yeah, regardless of the building.
Which is as big
size.
as one floor of most houses in town.
Yeah.
Right. It's too big.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we can leave it at, we can say 15% of the area of the wall to a maximum of 32, or 10%
think
of the
that-
area of the wall.
Yeah, I think that you would be happier with that, ladies.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Mark, we need to have, now I feel like I'm talking to both of you at the same time.
I always wonder which one.
Mark with the K, Mark with the C. Mark Planner. So one of the things I think the reason this came up again for the town was really because of Dollar Tree. And just to let you know a little bit of history there, when we did approve that, we did ask the developer to have a more aesthetically appealing sign for us. And we gave them examples of Dollar Tree signs in other communities that were more fitting, looked a little bit more appealing. And we were basically told no, that the developer wasn't going to work with us because they didn't have to, kind of thing. So when we pulled up, even if you just do it now, if you Google signs for Dollar Tree, you're going to see all these different formats. Some of them look beautiful and some of them look junky. And I think we ended up on the shorter end of the stick. So maybe thinking about that as an example.
Okay.
That was one of the reasons we started doing this again to begin with. May I ask another question as well, or do you want to continue with this one, Mark?
I've concluded everything I had for concerns, so go right ahead.
Okay. My only other question was related to 6.6.47, which is on page 4. And so the temporary subdivision sale signs should be mentioned. They should be coming down sooner than they are. So there should be some criteria, because what I see is they just deteriorate and deteriorate and deteriorate over time. And there's a few of them on 44 that have been there for years. And we have another couple around town. I'm wondering if we can put in something to do with those temporary subdivision signs or temporary sale signs coming down.
A definition of temporary, maybe?
Yes, maybe that's the thing to do.
Well, there is a, wait a minute, that's in a different section.
6.6.56 at the end of 60 days.
Yeah. Maybe we move, well, but when they're selling lots, it's gonna be much
They
more
need
than
it.
60 days.
Yeah.
Maybe what we do is we move it in to out of exempt and don't put it into temporary, but put it into the general section. And we just say that they need a permit because they're in the general section and they shall be permitted on an annual basis. So they have to come back in and re-permit it every year. And that's when the building commissioner can say, well, you've sold the lots or you've sold the homes and it's no longer an active subdivision. Therefore, we're not going to because the builder may want it up because he still builds in town in the community.
That's right.
And he
That's
wants
exactly
his
right.
name out there, and that's
Yeah.
understandable.
Keep
The guy's
advertising.
in business, but
The last certificate of occupancy should be the trigger. Once that last certificate of occupancy is issued, they should be good to remove that final sign, right? Because it's finished.
No, I
Yeah.
think that's too much leeway.
Or
Okay.
I
Well,
mean, Barbara,
I grew up in Highland Park, and that was developed in the very early 70s. That's where the old Heritage Hill Country Club is.
Yeah,
And when I was 18, there were still some lots that hadn't been developed. So, and my parents built when I was 1.
wow.
So to say that, you know, and that, some of those may have been bought by somebody as an investment and then just never, and then they put back on the market years later. But to say a developer could just leave his sign up in perpetuity because one lot didn't have an occupancy permit, I think that's a little too much leeway.
I agree. That's a really good example. And I also think that in most cases, a year's a long time. Most of these they're in and out of them in less than that time period.
Well, I'll move them to, I'll talk to Nate and see how long it takes for some of the subdivisions around here to get constructed and resold, because typically they'll want to put them up once they begin work, so they can get some pre-sales, you know, once they begin the road work. So they're really not even beginning road housing construction for several months, because I don't know about here, but usually you don't issue a building permit until, you know, the road is, you know, the base coat is down on the roadway. I don't know. Some towns will issue it when there's a gravel base, but so usually that's several months of work. And so then they got to sell them, or they start construction, and that's 8 months to a year or more, depending on the homes being developed. So I
You're right.
think
This market is different.
yeah. So, and
I
then
think
there's
2 years
multiple.
maximum. If you
Yeah,
can
so
shelve
I
it
think,
at
yeah, I think something like around 2 years, because after that, even if they still have lots left, they can market them. There are people living there, there's houses built, and they can market them through brokers, and they can put their little real estate signs out front on the weekends and so on.
and I wouldn't have a problem if at the end of the neighborhood or at the end of the subdivision, they put up a standard, you know, 24-inch by 18-inch real estate sign and took down the 32 square foot decrepit sign.
Right.
that was,
Okay.
I was gonna say that too. Is there anything we could add as far as if it becomes, you know, in disrepair to be replaced?
Well, we have that in other sections of the bylaw.
Yeah, I know it's under what the removal of signs. But it says insecure, danger of falling over or deemed unsafe, but what if it's just, it's not unsafe, but it's just in disrepair, like
Yeah,
Barbara said.
there's another. All signs shall be maintained. This includes awning, material, lettering, signs, landscaping, lighting and landscaping. It's under the general 6.6.3.9.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Are we okay to move along, everyone? So I give everybody, and I want Peter and Jack to have an opportunity. So other than what we discussed tonight, if anybody had any concerns that they wanted to email Mark, do it during the week, and I would motion to continue the signed bylaw discussion until our next meeting
Second,
on February 24th, 7 p.m.
get a motion in a second.
I have a second? I did.
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor, Barbara?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Myself. Motion carries. Signed bylaw continues. Next item. I don't have anything printed out, Mark, but I have the filling station corrections from 2018 town meeting. You wanna go
Yeah,
through that?
I did not finish those. We don't have those for
Okay,
discussion tonight, so that'll
That's fine.
have to
So-
go to the next one.
You can just, we'll put those on the agenda for the 24th as well. I'm not even going to continue it.
Yes.
Because we're not even going to discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
You had sent us a copy of the open space residential development draft bylaw.
That's
Um,
correct.
You want to, I mean, I read through it. I don't want you to have to read through the whole thing. I think it's a pretty good comprehensive look at that. I had a couple of small concerns.
Yep.
I liked the ownership change that you did, where you kept the homeowners association from being allowed to keep ownership, which I think is a good belt and suspenders for the potential of redevelopment wouldn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So you had the lot size with either public water or
Right.
actually the sewer and water things, reduced the lot size to 30,000 or 20,000, which I'm fine with, but I was looking at the setbacks. And I just kind of did a square root of 20,000 and 30,000 to see what potential frontage could be on a square.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also did with the side setbacks with a 50-foot frontage in Lakeville and 15-foot setbacks. That only allows for a 20-foot wide building. So I was just wondering if you would be okay with if we increased the frontage to like 75 feet.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's fine. I mean, yeah, I mean, usually what happens is if you have a 50-foot frontage, this allows them to do like a little narrower entrance into the buildable area. So they
Yeah.
have a long driveway, and then the buildable area is toward the back, and they have that kind of flexibility. That's why in a lot of OSRD bylaws, they have a small frontage requirement. So, I mean,
And that certainly works if you had like a cul-de-sac
right.
to spoke off of that, you'd be getting wider lots. And so I guess maybe to your point, I'm not looking at it too deeply. It's a minimum, but it's not a requirement. So they could be forced to have 100 feet of frontage on lots on an outside corner or just on a straightaway to achieve a buildable, reasonable lot.
Yeah, but you generally in these types of subdivisions, you want to give some flexibility. You want to get out of that mindset that we have of you have to have this front yard circle of 160 feet across the front of and you have to go, okay, it's all right to have a small frontage and have a big pork chop shaped type lot and develop toward the back. So, and that's fine. So there's a longer driveway to get into the buildable portion of the lot. Remember, they have to also, this is for the open space lot. So they also still have to prove that they can build the conventional subdivision with all those giant frontage lots.
Right.
So,
And that clearly precludes wetlands from that. That's all an upland development or.
right. So if it's a 20,000 square foot lot, all 20 or there has to be at least 20,000 square feet of upland. Or if it's a 30,000 square foot lot, there has to be 30,000 square feet of upland. There could be some wetland on it, but there has to be 30,000 square feet of upland of contiguous.
Right, but what I'm
upland.
saying is when the developer has to prove that he could get 40 lots into a 50-acre piece of conventional zoning,
Right.
he just can't overlay over 10 acres of wetlands and say, that's my acreage, this is my lots. He has to prove that they're all buildable
That's correct.
at the conventional zoning that we currently have of 175 feet of frontage and 70,000 square feet of lot space with 52,000 square feet of contiguous upland. They have to prove that prior to going to the open space residential development.
That's exactly right. They have to get preliminary subdivision approval. So they have to be able to show that every single one of those 40 lots could be developed.
Mhm.
So they don't have to necessarily go out and perk every one, but they have to show that the soil conditions are consistent. We'll get a comment letter from the Board of Health saying that it's possible to develop septic systems in all of those 40 lots, that the Conservation Commission will agree that the wetland impacts won't be significant enough that they couldn't get permitted, and that they'll be able to keep the proper separation for septic systems from wetlands, so on and so forth. And if there's any question about that, you don't have to approve the 40 lot preliminary plan. And the developer, because remember, the OSRD is a special permit. So they have to really want to comply and get the benefits. So you as the board need to make sure that that 40 lot really can be built. I mean, if you don't feel that some of those lots can be built, then that'll be the debate you have with the developer, and maybe it becomes a 38 lot subdivision. And he gets a preliminary approval for a 38 lot subdivision, and then he does a 38 lot cluster.
Yeah, okay.
So-
And again, we talked earlier today, Mark. Did you happen to get any comments back from the building commissioner?
No, I have not. I did spend a little time with Ed at the Board of Health agent discussing the lot sizes with him. So I haven't written it in, but I wanted to add something for the next meeting, which refers to surface water protection districts as shown on the Mass GIS maps. So there are different levels of protection, zones A, B, and C. And so there are some state requirements on these zones as far as sewer flow and how many square feet of upland is required in these various zones. So I wanted to incorporate that. And so what that basically means is that if you're in one of these zones, I can, this little thing. Everyone
sharing
see
your
that?
screen.
Great, excellent.
You shared your screen. You're a tech guy.
Actually, if I knew how to share my screen, I did save this. But basically it shows about half the town is within some of these districts. And because of the limitations in these zones of basically 10,000 square feet per bedroom. So in order to build in these zones, they would need 30,000 square feet. So I was going to add an additional requirement that if you're in one of the surface water protection districts as shown on a plan, and so I'll have plans that'll be submitted that'll be part of this approval. It'll be like an overlay for a portion of this bylaw, that the minimum lot size will be 30,000 square feet. So
Okay.
yeah, regardless of whether there's water or sewer or both. Well, and I guess but we don't have really sewer available for subdivision, so.
I know a big part of the water protection and with conservation, recharge of water into groundwater is important. Would percentage of permeability be a good thing to have in there?
It's a good question.
I don't know. We do have something in here already in the.
Currently,
current zoning.
residential is like a maximum of 25%
That's correct. Yeah.
lot coverage. So I just didn't know if with the cluster zone, we wanted to adjust that for both parties. I mean, obviously they're leaving 50% of the entire parcel as undisturbed, or, call it undisturbed. So do we still put a restriction, or do we change that 25% for cluster zoning to suit the smaller lot, but still protect the recharge of permeable?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be reasonable to increase that.
Is that something we could maybe just send a a memo to conservation to ask them comment on it.
Yeah. What I'll do is I will, so we have so I just listed frontage, front yard, side yard, and rear yard. Our chart in the zoning has several other dimensions, things in here, maximum height of the building. I wouldn't propose we change that or anything else, but what I'll do is I'll just copy this entire list and I'll put it in the draft for next time. And I'll talk to conservation and Ed again at the Board of Health to see if they have any concerns if we increase the lot coverage because the lots are smaller. So in order to fit a building and parking and a pool or something like that.
Exactly. I mean, we don't want it to be bound to a uncomfortable standard because we granted a builder a good thing and the homeowner loses out, but I also don't want to make it not good for the environment.
Right, and it also, if it's not good for the builder, then he's not going to go do an open space bylaw if he goes, well, I can only build, tiny little shed type houses because it's too restrictive. So,
Right.
So I'll talk to them about that, and I'll incorporate this the rest of this chart into the next draft.
Super. Go ahead, Barbara.
Mark, just a point of history I wanted to share with you. When you guys were talking about the pork chop sized lot, shaped lot.
Yep.
So there are many examples of those kinds of things around town that have created unneighborly feelings. Let's leave it there. There's some really, because of bad decisions that were made, and we've seen them. I mean, they've come before us where, they've got this thin little strip going behind the property. So I think that something like, those cases, and we have it in my own development, are tolerable when you have very large lot, and they become very pronounced when you have smaller lots closer together. So I just hope that whatever we're doing here, that we're going to achieve some uniformity. It would concern me that we would get too many convoluted things to try to push it together. And it kind of dovetails with what Mark's saying about making sure that the home quality is they're not compromising it, just giving all the benefit to the developer, which is what happens when you do these pork chop size lots.
Well, if you look at the one of the plans, I sent out 3 versions of small, a medium, and a large one that we did in Foxborough. And the small one, which was 2 little roads that went out, and so we could preserve the open space around the pond. I think if you look at those, some of those lots may have had some, like, I can't remember, smaller frontages or something. But look at those 3 plans and see.
Those are all very nicely done.
Oh, they are?
Yeah,
Okay.
I
Can't
don't
remember exactly.
They're not, they're pretty, they don't look like kind of the case of examples that I'm bringing up. I mean,
Okay.
I'm just thinking in particular, Cross Street was the most recent one I can think of where they did the development. That's where we had talked about doing a plan along these lines. And the developer had proposed putting, the lot and then the little strip of land to make it conform. I believe it went behind 2 of their neighbors' homes.
Okay.
And, it's great until somebody wants to put up a fence or wants chickens. You know what I mean? So where the lots that you have, at least on the Foxborough example, are all, that looks very reasonably planned to me. There's no weirdness happening. There's a little weirdness, but it's still okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's some odd shapes there, but okay.
But it's nicely done. If I see any of those examples, Mark, I'll share them with you. You can see what's I'm talking about.
Okay. Oh, I understand.
Michelle, did you have anything on this or? Good.
No, I like everything that you brought up about, with the Concom and getting comments from Nate. And, I definitely, I don't want it to just benefit the developers. I'd like it to just keep along with the same rural charm that we have here in town. But I understand that it is a special permit only. And I think that does keep certain protections in place, and leaves it in our hands when it comes down to it. But I think, Mark, you did say there are benefits to the town by adopting this open space residential development bylaw. Could you just refresh my memory what those items are?
Well, it benefits by preserving some of the land as open space. And the smaller lots can keep some of the houses more affordable in the community. You get less drainage and road runoff to deal with, so you get less pollution going into downstream to wetlands and so on and so forth. So those are just some of the benefits that you get from.
I think what she might be asking about is the, I believe that this is referenced in the housing production plan. Do you guys recollect that, or am I remembering that incorrectly?
I know it's referenced in the master plan, but I'm not sure about the housing production plan.
I think it is, but I'll see if I can find a copy of that.
Yeah, it's a way of allowing more different variety of housing in the community. So it may have been in the housing production plan, but
I
But
just,
certainly would be a nice option to protect open space while allowing some affordable housing.
mhm.
as long as we can do it right and it doesn't lead to water in the basements for these homeowners.
Yeah.
So Mark and Barbara, if you have nothing else, I'd like to continue this to await comment from conservation and the building commissioner. And also I'd like to hear from Peter and Jack if they have anything that they'd like to give input on.
Agreed.
Are you good with that, Mark?
Yes, yeah, no, that's great.
All right, so I'll make a motion to continue the open space residential development draft bylaw until our next meeting at 7 p.m. on February 24th.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Barbara?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Motion carries. Next item, site plan review, the amended bylaw for that.
Okay. So that's where I started. We're back to this. Okay. So the site plan review, we have not reviewed this entire, all these amendments to this yet. So I'll go through the entire thing, kind of still summarizing it a bit. So the first part of site plan review is the same. That's the purpose of site plan review. And then the things that I'd like you to consider, convenience of safety and vehicular, safe pedestrian safety, how the waste is disposed, just some general goals. And then, so we had two sections. Excuse me 1 sec. On procedures for business or industrial and what needs to get submitted for those. And we had another section for procedures for residential site plan review. And the limitation on that was the amount of land being disturbed, which was 1 acre. So if you disturb more than 1 acre, and then it had a list of requirements to submit. So I did not change what the business or industrial applied to, or the list of requirements to be submitted, because those are just like plan requirements, showing the plan, the lighting, the drainage, et cetera, et cetera. So there was nothing here that's so out of whack that I just left it there and focus more on the other stuff. I mean, there's enough authority in this revised bylaw that if there's something that you feel ought to be addressed, that you can request, that's reasonable, you can request it anyways. So each section had something about submitting copies their own section about submitting copies. So I removed one of them and left one in. It was kind of redundant. So so that's at the bottom of the first page. It just says to remove the following two sentences. And the other reason why we removed that is to act within 21 days of the receipt of the site plan is basically impossible when you need to have a hearing and scheduling and so on and so forth. So we removed that. Then we in the bottom of the second page, we moved the submittal requirements to a section later under review procedure. So, and that's the only change on page 2. So then on the top of page 3, which is the procedure for residential, we had a longer section which included that it applied for residential over 1 acre, and then also the same requirement for acting within 21 days of the submittal of the site plan. So I removed that and I added a new thing saying site plan review shall apply to, and then I said new multifamily building construction of 3 or more units. And then I left the requirement that construction modification or addition any residential structure which will disturb more than 1 acre of ground. So so typically in most communities, site plan review applies to multifamily construction of really any size. So in some cities, it'll kick off over 3 units, you know, it'll allow for a triple decker or something like that. But in most smaller communities, it comes in after the standard 2-family that many builders like to build. A lot of village centers or town centers allow 2-family by right, so there's no site plan review. So that's why that's the change there. And then the procedural section at the end of the residential was the same as the one that was at the end of the commercial that I moved to a procedural section, which is the next section. So I just deleted the remainder of that. So then I added a new section for the review procedure, which says the same thing as before, that the applicants must submit an application of abutters list fees and copies of the plan to the clerk for the planning board to approve. And then in addition, they have to file. I don't like this procedure, and that's what I wanted to discuss. I was hoping Kathy would be here. I don't know currently, and maybe you know, do they really submit copies of plans to all these departments themselves, or does Kathy just collect them all and distribute them once the
I
applicant?
believe Kathy distributes them.
Okay, so I'd like to change this if there's no objection to, you know, have them submit, you know, 15 copies and have them be just, you know, to the planning department and have them be distributed by the office here. That way I know
I don't have
that
a problem with that, but I would just want confirmation from Kathy. I don't want to be speaking out of turn. I'm assuming, and I think that's the process that she distributes them after she receives them in, but I just, again, I don't want to speak out of turn and be wrong on that one, so.
Yeah.
I think you're right, Mark, because I think she wanted to keep track of when they were received.
Right.
You know, that they were actually.
Right, because she
receiving
starts
them.
the clock on the 10-day before that we could post a hearing.
Okay.
I think I remember her saying it as well. It was especially with the COVID because a lot of the offices were closed. So she started taking it
so
on
she-
herself.
Okay, that's normally the procedure, is that everything gets filed, all the copies, whatever is required. And that way, you know that they were properly distributed, that certain departments were purposely or not, or accidentally, skipped by an applicant. So I will revise this for the next time.
I have a question about that while we're on it, if you don't mind, Mark.
Sure.
So with the fire chief and the police chief, the health agent, they all pretty much can speak to those things. But I know maybe open space meets infrequently, or say the Board of Selectmen, if they didn't have a meeting within that 10-day period, they might get a little riled up about not being able to make an official comment. I'm indifferent to it because they're not all necessarily land use boards, but I guess I just want to hear your thoughts on that. If there's a process clearly outlined, is that all we need to do? And
So typically, yes, the Open Space Committee is normally not a committee. An Open Space Committee usually is formed to rewrite the open space plan, and then it is somewhat dissolved. It's usually not part of site plan review distributions. All the other departments that are on this list are normally, in my experience, are get copies of the plans. And then, yeah, I can change this verbiage here. Typically, most site plans, yeah, I'll rewrite this verbiage so that there'll be plenty of time. I mean, usually, it's at least a few weeks from the time it gets submitted to the opening of the first hearing. So most boards or departments have enough opportunity to review them. So,
okay, and I'm not looking to lengthen the process as much as I just wanted your opinion from your experience.
Right.
Is 10 days enough? And if a board can't comment, then that's considered acceptance.
yeah, I mean, again, remember, each board it's just their recommendation. If they choose to submit a comment letter, I mean, many of the departments, I don't know about here, but most communities, a lot of departments don't really send comments, particularly police and fire, unless they have concerns.
Yep.
About a particular thing. Fire, commercial stuff, a lot of times the fire chief wants bigger fire lanes, more fire, they want signage everywhere. So yeah, so I think yeah, I'll rewrite that if you'd
Okay.
like me to do that, to reflect what Kathy has been doing and what makes a little more sense than this existing section. I didn't really want to change too much from the existing bylaw, and I kind of wanted to focus my time and effort on other stuff. But now that we have that drafted, I'll have a couple weeks to do that. The next section says, planning board shall give notice of hearing in the newspaper of general circulation at least 7 days prior to the hearing, and notices will be sent to abutters at least 7 days prior to the hearing. So it's a 7-day notice. It's not unusual. Some towns do the same 14 days as subdivisions or zoning board. They don't reduce it. I don't know. I just left it at 7 from what I think I've done in some other towns, but we can make it 14 days. I don't know what
I'm going to go on your recommendation.
because there's no state statute pertaining to site plan review, so you're not required to follow
Yeah, so to that, and I think you initially started out with the 21 days is unreasonable to act.
Right.
I would say it would be nice to not be under the gun and have a reasonable amount of time to start acting on the process. And so if you felt 14 days is fine, that's fine.
Well, that's the next section says the public hearing shall be posted no later than 21 days after the receipt of the application. So I kept the 21 days, and that might have been like the original intent, is that, you know, within, but it wasn't really well drafted, is that within 21 days, that's why I left it at 21 days. Within 21 days, yeah, you should post the hearing notice and pick a date and send it to the newspaper and mail the notices out. So, you know, that's 3 weeks to even if it's summer and the board's on a reduced schedule, we should at least be able to figure out when we're going to meet and get something posted. So,
Okay.
May I ask a question on this section?
sure.
So everybody knows we don't really have a newspaper around here. We have the Standard Times. I think we have the Middleborough Gazette, but I'm wondering if there should be another way of noticing. We've taken some steps in town to have these emails sent out to the public to let them know important things that are happening in town. Because in the absence of having a public thing like that, should we be incorporating some other more progressive way of communicating other than just the newspaper, because readership is so far down now?
Well, that's a good question, because people get their information from so many different sources now that it's hard to pinpoint any one particular source. I mean, that's why notifying abutters is important, because if they're an abutter to a project, they tell 2 people and so on and so forth, and the people around it generally know and have the most concern or not, but you find out. So I think the notice in the paper is just kind of, and all same thing about posting at town hall. I mean, that's also part of the process as it gets posted. I mean, I don't know whether Kathy ever puts hearing notices on the website or not, but again, it's a very limited, you know, outreach is, you know,
Michelle, did you have a
people.
comment on that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, so on the town website, the official posting location for all board committee meetings was designated as the town website calendar. So I know that I don't know if that is included for, you know, like site plan review, but it's there's that as well.
Yeah, that might just show like the fact that the planning board is meeting, but I don't know if it's necessarily meant for posting of hearing notices.
Yeah, maybe it's not considered legal notice by
Yeah,
the courts.
I mean, legal notice is what's here. I mean, that's what a legal notice still for subdivision, for zoning, you still have to do that for public hearings. So, you know.
Like Barbara said, yeah, newspaper, it's not really much of a notice any longer. So,
No, but
yeah.
but there's no good alternative. There's no
Right.
okay, so the next section is performance standards. So these are things in which you use to evaluate and lets the developer know what you're going to be looking at when they submit their drawings. Now, the first sections state what needs to get submitted, but this is kind of your standard for reviewing them. So that's specifically the first one is the purpose. You know, it's been adopted in order to control the size, scale, and impacts of non-residential or multifamily developments. So, and you shall ensure that the standards are met during the course of any planning board special permit review application or site plan review. So whether So these apply to both. So preservation of landscape, just a general standard, a statement shall be served in its natural state insofar as practical by minimizing any grade changes, vegetation, and soil removal. So, unless they're developing the whole site, it needs to get cleared. You can you can talk to them about preserving and not altering other areas of the site, but that's unnecessary. Off-street parking and loading, just requiring that they comply with the sections currently in the zoning for that. And it also says provision shall be made for snow storage, but that's becoming less and less important, unfortunately. Circulation, this talks about driveways and internal circulation shall be safe and convenient for automobiles as well as pedestrians and bike traffic. So here's the site distances, driveways, widths, grade locations, and all other things shall be provided for review. So there's a long list of those. And it also says the planning board reserves the right to require that certain driveways meet or exceed roadway standards found in the subdivision regs. So you're trying to you can require that the site construction be of a certain quality that's found in your regs. And in some cases, you may want that to exceed that. Site access, this talks about the safety of the motorists, bicycles, and pedestrians utilizing the site. You can, to ensure public safety, you can require sidewalks or paths within or between developments, and you can require the connections of adjacent properties via the use of common driveways. Architectural requirements, so this is just a basic statement that considerations shall be given to ensure that buildings are of appropriate in scale, massing, height, roof line, and building materials to ensure that the architecture shall be in harmony with the surrounding neighborhoods and the town. And then rooftop mechanicals shall be hidden from the view of the street. So this is kind of just a general statement, but in some communities you then adopt, additional architectural requirements kind of as a subsection of this, or you can adopt a whole separate design guidelines. Now that this has been drafted, over the next 2 weeks, I'm going to try and draft a series of short little subsections, so we have something in here about roof lines, siding, windows, just some very basics, so that we have something that we have time to discuss before we have to submit it to the selectmen for the Springtown meeting, so that at least as we will have something in there so that you can, if you don't want the what was the name of the store that just got built not long? Dollar Tree. So if you don't want the standard corporate Dollar Tree look and you want a more New England style look, even though such is the CVS, even though it's a corporate building, it's a New England style, it has clapboard type siding, it has some pitched roofs, it has a dormer awning, it has all those types of New England things that represent New England. You'll be able to require that.
So Mark, since you brought up Dollar Tree again.
Yes.
Okay, of favorite development, I think it was 6.3. Okay, at the bottom of 6.7.3.6 under the architectural requirements, and I do understand we're going to be building that out. Yes. But I will tell you, in that case, the word adjoining properties, so having the rooftop mechanical installation shall be hidden from view from the street or adjoining properties. So we have a development right behind there, and that was a concern for us when that was approved.
Okay.
Because we didn't want them to have to look at the back of, so adjoining would be maybe, I don't know what word to use there, because that to me says attached.
Oh, abutting properties.
abutting properties, and I don't know, that's a tough one, because you don't want to make it too complicated and say it can't be visible for any property anywhere around, because you just can't interpret every situation that could come up.
Right.
But food for thought there on that one.
Okay.
That's a good example, Dollar Tree. And then the other one I wanted to ask you about was 6.7.37, which is the next one.
Yep.
We've been getting, which has been wonderful, a lot more input from conservation since I've been here. It feels like it's more than it's ever been, which has been wonderful. I think that they're going to have a lot more to say about that.
Okay.
Because they have had a lot more to say. So we may want to run. Mark, are you still on that committee?
Sure.
Yeah. So that would be something that maybe they would want to have more input on.
You need to have more specificity to that
Mhm.
section. Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
Well, I think they're always in favor of native plantings rather than either invasive or non-native.
Right. Well, it says that specifically here. Plants should be indigenous to the.
Agreed.
Yes, and to survive New England winters, which are getting milder, but. Okay. So after that section, we have a section on lighting. So lighting shall be designed to enhance public safety and provide for adequate and appropriate outdoor lighting. But the design should not produce unwanted glare, light trespass, and so on. And then it says lighting shall be full cutoff fixtures, dark sky compliant, except for sign lighting. So, if they're doing like a carved or painted sign out front and they want to put a couple spotlights to light it up instead of doing a big internally illuminated sign, I think that's fine. So that's why that's. The next section is for service areas and delivery locations. They should be not on the main street. You can require that they be specific areas so they don't hinder the operation of the business, and that service areas should be like dumpsters and trash receptacle locations should be screened from the street and from public view. And they can use a variety of materials. They don't have to be plants or walls or fences. They can use any of those. The next section talks about utility service. So it says basically they shall be placed underground wherever practical. So including, electric cables, phone lines.
So I want to pause here real quick, Mark. We had a development that came before us at small subdivision. I don't remember exactly where it was, but it's maybe 4 or 5 units. And the developer, we had wanted to see underground utilities, but the developer was kind of like, that doesn't really work for us. And we don't have requirements that say it has to be underground. And I'm talking residential. I realize this isn't residential, but just food for thought. We've had a couple of really bad storms when people have lost a lot of power and been out. And I do think for the resiliency of our community, we should be focusing on getting more and more of our utilities underground. I was really happy to see that. And I'd like to see us try to figure out how to build that in on the residential side as well. Because a homeowner doesn't need to be without heat and, electricity for long periods of time. We're going to see more ice storms.
Yes, yeah, and heavier windstorms and the like. So,
Yeah.
so kind of after we get through zoning in the next couple months, we will turn to the left or the right,
Okay.
and we will begin to look at the planning board rules and regs, and including the subdivision, so we can begin to address that as well.
And if I'm not here, you guys remember that.
Yes.
Michelle and Mark, remember.
And we will also remember this does apply to multifamily development. So
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. You had earlier in the package that it applies to multifamilies 3 or more units, and I was just wondering why we wouldn't have considered for 2 units.
well, generally duplexes are kind of considered like a single family home. In many communities, a lot of zoning allows 1 or 2 family by right in certain districts. And so it's typically not something that most communities review under site plan review. They usually it's 3 or more, because then that's really more of a multifamily dwelling. So,
What if we had a little subdivision where they did 2, 2, 2, and 2, and 2?
well, you would review that on the subdivision control.
I guess, yeah, I guess you would, unless they, yep. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, through you, if I may, since there's only certain zoning areas that allow those sort of multifamily units, could we add something to that effect? So that, you know, if a builder happens to be looking through site plan review, they don't think that it's by right and that it's, you know, only where zoning allows.
Well, I think as we move forward with other initiatives and planning in the community, we may allow other multifamily developments, as we discussed about the MBTA community
But
requirements.
wouldn't that still just be where that zoning allows?
What do you mean? I don't quite
Because-
get it.
Because that would be an overlay in just a certain area of town. It wouldn't be throughout town.
Right. But I mean, so, well, if let's say there's an existing 3-unit building somewhere in town that's in a residential neighborhood and they want to knock it down and build a new one, then at least you'd be able to review that. So if you restrict the review of multifamily developments to only if they're allowed by the underlying zoning district, then you're restricting your ability to review something like that.
Do we know
Okay.
if there's any of those that exist? Are there? Do you happen
Yeah,
to
but-
know, Mark? Or no, I should say?
I'm sure it's scattered somewhere around town. There's a few, buildings with multiple units in them.
There was a popular trend for a time to take old homes and condoize them, Michelle. So
There are some?
I don't know of any in Lakeville, but I've certainly seen them in other towns.
Right.
Yeah, I actually own a house that has 3 units, one of those giant big farmhouses, and there's a unit on the 3rd floor and there's one in the back, and there's the main part of the house. So if my house burned down and I decided I wanted to build it now as 3 really big condos and I met all the other requirements, I would be able to avoid, if you change that language, I'd be able to avoid coming before the planning board to do that. So,
So that's still considered a new build, even if it's just a rebuild?
yes, yeah. Yeah, I would not restrict it to something that says, oh, and only if in the underlying zoning district, because yeah, I wouldn't do that. There are always these outliers. Someone gets a variance from the zoning board.
And that's why we needed a planner, Mark. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, moving along. How are we doing?
Okay, the next one basically is a long section about drainage. Basically, it says we prefer you to use low impact development methods if possible, if it's feasible. You need to design it in accordance with the state business stormwater handbook, post-development rates shall not exceed pre-development rates. So you can't really change the characteristics of the drainage off the site. And then if so easements shown on the plan, if they need to be granted to the town for any reason, written easement shall be submitted. So, you know, just some very basic drainage requirements. A lot of towns, and I don't know whether we've adopted any more specific general drainage requirements, but many towns now have. So I'm not quite familiar enough with the rest of our bylaws, but at least there's some basic standards in there. So the next one is offsite improvements. The planning board can require the applicant to make offsite improvements to roadways or other facilities, or make payments for costs associated with the impact of the proposed development. So if your development is going to generate a lot of foot traffic, and it's a quarter mile to the nearest sidewalk, the existing sidewalk network, you can require not only a sidewalk in front of the property as they redo this, you know, the site drives and driveway entrances, but you can require them to make that quarter or half mile connection to the existing sidewalk network. So if they're making an impact, they need to mitigate those impacts. So for example, talking about sidewalks in Foxborough, as part of Patriot Place, the craft group installed several miles of offsite sidewalks throughout the town, traffic calming measures, and a variety of things because of the extra traffic and foot and pedestrians in the town, to address things like safety, traffic speeds, and those kinds of things. So if you have a development of that scale, you'll be able to, or even a smaller one. We've required smaller ones in the past in various places to do improvements. So it gives you that kind of flexibility.
I love it. I love it, love it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to justify what you're requiring.
Understood. Understood. But at least we have some tools there. That's good.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the next sections for public safety, ensuring that you know, the buildings and grounds shall permit reasonable access for the operation by police and fire and other emergency equipment. You can require fire lanes to allow access for, you know, the fire department. So that's pretty straightforward section. And construction standards, basically it says all construction specs shall meet the standards of your subdivision regs, which subdivision regs usually have a more complete construction standards for roadways, driveways, drainage systems. I'm not that familiar with what we have, but we'll be working to improve that in the next few months. So, and then where that doesn't apply, then the latest Mass Highway standards or standard engineering practices shall apply. So that's the end of that section. And then the next is more the post-hearing section on the decision, inspections, fees, and appeals. So the planning board shall take final action within 21 days after you close the public hearing by vote of the majority of the voting quorum. And you may attach any reasonable conditions to mitigate any impact of the proposed development. And any disapproval shall state the reasons why you feel it does not meet the standard, the requirements of this bylaw. And then, of course, any appeals shall set forth in accordance with Mass General Law 48, Section 17. The site plan approval is good for 2 years. from the date of the final action unless they have started work. Extensions, the board may grant an extension for an additional 2-year period. And extension shall be granted after that on a year-to-year basis. And they should provide you a schedule, so on and so forth. And, oh, it's missing a sentence. And the sentence should say, I thought I typed that in. The sentence should say provided, something like provided the use and plans are still in conformance with the town of Lakeville zoning bylaw. In other words, if zoning has changed somewhere or some requirement has changed that no longer that site plan is not in conformance with the bylaw, then you cannot grant an extension. Compliance. No building permit should be issued or site construction shall be started until the decision has been filed with the clerk and endorsed by the planning board. On site construction changes, these always happen. So the town planner can review and approve some limited changes. Anything of significance has to go back to the planning board to review. Maybe I'm looking at an older draft, a couple things I took, rewrote, but it says essentially the same thing. Regulations, the board may adopt procedural regulations, application forms, standard construction detail drawings, and specs of the administration without requiring town meeting approval. I'm not so sure I like this. I was gonna tweak, I may tweak this a little bit. I think this gives us, I don't want to say a little too much leeway for to the planning board, but yeah, because some of it's like obvious, like you have the right already to change application forms and and subdivision without going to site plan review. So it's kind of stating the obvious. I may take that entirely out. And then the planning board may adopt reasonable administrative fees, technical review fees, and inspection fees for site plan review. And any appeal, well, that's redundant. We already had the appeal in there somewhere. So, so I'll take one of them out. The only thing I may have in here, just for clarity purposes, is we should begin to inspect site plans as under construction to ensure that they are constructed as per the plans. So whether we hire a retired engineer or we go with a larger, another engineering firm is something we can discuss. I've used both in the past for a variety of scales of projects. But you should be requiring and setting a inspection fee and having projects reviewed and inspected during construction.
So it doesn't all have to fall to the building commissioner. Every single thing.
Yeah, I mean,
really
he's not going to necessarily know or have the time to run out, when they're setting a catch basin to make sure that it's properly, set in the ground and it has the proper base so it doesn't sink and so on and so forth, and the pipes are properly backfilled and utilities installed. Underground drainage is always something that needs to be properly inspected to make sure that it's got the right kind of stone and material and wrap on them, so that they continue to function for a long time.
No, that's huge. I think that's really, really, really important. We have not been doing that, so that's huge.
Mhm.
Everything should have that.
Yeah,
Good
agreed.
advice. I found the housing production plan and I'm sending it over to you, Mark, both my marks, and I'll send it to Kathy so she can share it. The open space plan is on that list.
All right. So as far as the site plan review draft that we just reviewed, I guess I'd like to continue that as well, to wait for, Mark was gonna make some changes to what we just discussed, as well as for Peter and Jack to have comment because they haven't had a chance. And we'll see if the building commissioner has anything on it as well. So if nobody has anything else, I'd make a motion to continue the site plan review bylaw change until February 24th at 7 p.m.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Barbara?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Myself. Motion carries unanimously. So I have in the agenda tonight, approve minutes for January 13th, 2022. I didn't see them.
You haven't gotten them, Kathy has not been here all week, so that's why, yeah. so
Okay.
that's why
I
you
just
don't
wanted to
have-
make sure I didn't miss something in my email. So
Yep.
we'll just put those off until also on the, hopefully the February 24th meeting.
Yep,
As I've said many times, our next meeting will be February 24th at 7 p.m. Does anybody else have anything else they'd like to discuss tonight? Mark?
so I have a couple other things to let you know about. So there's been some inquiries about someone wanting to perhaps open a brew pub in town, or I'm thinking about for the next meeting, writing a definition for a brew pub / tap room, and allowing it in the business district and perhaps in the industrial district, so that it's absolutely clear, because they may or may not be interpreted or defined as a restaurant, because many of them don't really serve food, or they serve a limited offering of snacks. People are really there about going and tasting the product, and taking, a 6-pack or a growler home and stuff like that. So I'd like to, rather than have it, and I think it's a desirable use, I mean, in the community, and lots of towns love to have them, and so I'd rather define it, and then we can discuss about whether you want to allow it by right, allow it by special permit, in automatically in both districts, or just in one and not the other, that kind of thing. So.
Okay. I think that's a good thing to have on the agenda.
And so I'll have that for the next time. It's looking like we're going to have a site plan filed next week for a property up on Bedford Street. So it's a multi-tenanted building. Probably, I don't know the exact size, but it's 10 to 20,000 square feet, like a small little plaza for a handful of stores. Nothing huge.
Is it
But
2 Bedford Street?
yes.
We saw it at Conservation already.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I'm a little bit familiar with it. And
Mhm.
everybody knows the site. So that'll be good to see. I wondered what happened to it. Kind of fell off the map.
Yeah, no, I talked to the attorney today, so she's probably going to come in on Monday and file it.
Okay,
And then we'll schedule that for probably the first meeting in March, probably. And also you mentioned, Barbara, the open space plan. So I don't know, I had a meeting with the open space committee a week ago. And so they are actually moving forward. They're almost completed basically the first 4 chapters, rewriting and updating those chapters. So we're now at the section where they evaluate the inventory of properties and the inventory of recreational properties as well. And so I've been in touch with the Parks Commission, and so I'll be coordinating that, helping the Parks Commission in evaluating their properties and getting that into the plan as well.
Great.
And so that is now at a point where they're, rounding the corner, throughout March. That evaluation probably will be happening if we get some better days with no snow on the ground, to be able to go out to some of these sites, and then hopefully be able to try and wrap that up during the springtime. So
Great progress. That's so exciting.
yeah, no, they've been working quite hard at it. They're being very precise about updating some of the basic information and that's in the plan. So.
Great.
And that's all I got.
So after the I just have a quick question mark for the for our other Mark R.
Okay.
So, we have the redevelopment of the 79 roadway there. And I'm just wondering if there's been any discussion about anything happening there, if anybody's heard any words about what will be happening with that road. We've got some really serious potholes. They had to block off the road in the last storm. And I know that the state, I just don't know where it stands. I just was wondering if anybody had heard anything.
I'm not aware of.
No.
I haven't,
Okay.
I haven't heard any updates.
No updates. Okay.
I guess we could maybe check with Franklin, the highway superintendent, see if he knows.
Okay.
We'll look into it.
Okay. Thank you. Can I make a motion to adjourn?
You can.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Barbara, Michelle?
Aye.
Myself. Motion carries unanimously. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Good night.